Greetings, comrades. I am Admiral Andre. Welcome to episode 8 of Kerbal Space Program. Now today I'm very sad, comrades, because Bandicam has been a traitor. I've already done episode 8 and Bandicam only recorded the first 7 minutes and the video was 1 hour and 40 minutes long. I think the reason why is because just after I started recording, I went into the folder where all the video files are saved, and I wanted to open the one I tested just before, but I clicked on the one that was currently being recorded, and somehow that interfered with it. I don't know. Anyway, it happened, and I have the whole audio of the thing, but that doesn't really help. And of course, with something like this, you can't re-record it. So I'm just going to catch you up on what happened, because you need to know. Luckily, it was only 2 launches and nothing too major. So I'll just quickly catch you up. Last time we met, it was day 94, I think. It's now day 109, so 2 weeks later. So the first thing is I took no new contracts. We only had the 2 contracts, I think it's only 2. No, we still have these, the Explore the Moon and Test the Ant. But the other 2 that we had, the one was Test the Decoupler at launch, and the other one was Transmit or Recover Data from Orbit or Space. So I did those 2. The first one was, let's just see, if I just go into the vehicle assembly building, obviously I save everything, which is a good thing in the game. Now we developed the Sputnik for the first time, so that was one thing we unlocked, and I don't think, oh yes, the other thing that we unlocked was the Science Junior. That's it, that's the only parts that we bought basically. So, before I launched anything, I did upgrade the vehicle assembly building and the launch pad to level 2. So that's the only big thing at the Space Center, and I'm sorry if it wasn't now recorded, but anyway. So I also said at the time, we'll make a rule. The Space Center, as we know, is still being constructed, you know, for role-playing purposes, and the whole reason for that is it's just for the atmosphere, you know, so it's almost like we're still trying to find how all of this works and trying to establish ourselves and all of that. It's the early days of space. So until all of the buildings are level 2, we'll say this is still under construction and we'll still launch from the desert, because after that we'll probably never launch from the desert anyway. So that's the only thing there. Then the other thing was, well, the first mission that I did then was to put a satellite in orbit with a Sputnik and to get some science out of that. But the goal was also to recover that afterwards. So I'll just show you what it was. And it was this one here. So I decided I'm going to call all the kind of low Kerbal orbit science satellites Iris 1, but we can still change that later. But you know, this is the Iris range of satellites. For example, the capsule we use, of course, is the Nova, so this would be the Iris. So this one was named after Comrade Elliot Burton, but maybe for the best that it wasn't recorded. This thing did not go very far. It was a failure ultimately, but we did get some science out of it. So I guess it's a partial success, and I'll still put that in the log as such. Now unfortunately, I'll have to go back to the audio, because I always put the information in the logs afterwards by looking at the video, but now I don't have a video, but I'll do it from the audio logs. But anyway, so we launched this thing. There's not even a reaction wheel here, and of course the Sputnik doesn't have SAS. So it started wobbling and going crazy. So we cut the engine, but it did drift up to space. We took the data from the lab here, the Science Junior, but that was all. All the other stuff was already done, you know, the temperature and all of that. I'll just show you inside. So basically, I just decided to do it like this. It looks a bit nicer like this, with the Stay Putnik inside. Obviously, imagining that this is one cargo bay. We can't take out this part in the middle here, unfortunately. Batteries on the top, and the science down there. Now, we don't have solar panels yet, so this was obviously only a temporary mission with the goal of bringing it back again. So it does have a heat shield there. So anyway, it went up to just over 70 kilometers. I took the readings. It came back down. It behaved very wildly during the descent, but it did survive. And so that gave us a little bit of science there. So I decided, what do we do better? Because this thing has no SAS. How do we put a satellite in orbit, you know, more easily? So I decided, don't save this, that the best way is to have a crew capsule, the Nova capsule obviously, on the top, and then it will deploy the actual satellite in orbit. So we use the SAS on the capsule, not on the Stay Putnik, and that worked beautifully. So unfortunately though, the one thing after launch was the rocket started to go retrograde, so we just went with it. So we ended up in retrograde orbit, only barely, almost out of fuel, but we made it. So with the rocket parts, the only changes I made were, there's a new pulsar, so it's not the 1B anymore, you know, with these tiny little winglets on the bottom. It's the 1C with the bigger wings on the bottom, as you see here. And the reason for that was because with the Stay Putnik having no SAS, I thought this might help, but it didn't really. So that's the only thing there. And the other thing was the Meteor. We of course have the Meteor A upper stage, but I thought we needed a bigger one, so the Meteor B is obviously the FLT 400 tank with the same engine. So it's just a bigger, more capable upper stage. So that's the Meteor B. So this rocket then went up. Obviously this fell away. This put the payload into orbit. Then this fell away. Obviously this is still in orbit then. The Meteor B there. Then we detach the payload, and then this thing comes home as well, with this decoupler still attached. The engine did work. We did a test on the runway just to see that the thrust would still come through there, because I didn't want to decouple this and leave it in orbit as well. So the satellite itself, just to have a quick look, it has no science on it at all. It's more of a demonstrator satellite, just to actually have one in space. It has no solar panel, so it will run out, quite soon. But it's again just to make the achievement. So that was not for a contract. All of the 2 contracts were done with that first one, with Elliott Burton, the decoupler on the launch pad and the collect data from space. So anyway, that's how it looks. And of course it just has the 4 antennas there. And that's it. That's all that I did. That's the whole story. Of course it took much longer in practice. But yes, the other thing was also with this whole thing. I'll just open it again. Don't save. Because now ultimately we don't count the upper stage when we calculate the payload mass. So if we decouple that, that's the payload for this mission. It was called Nova 5, but it had 2 different names. There's a point where you can do that. Here, we did it like this with a configure naming. So this was Nova 5, Mr. Womble, and the satellite was Iris 2, and that was Space Bear, Comrade Space Bear. So in any case, this is then ultimately the payload for that mission, and that was over 2 tons. If we see there, you see it's 2.4 tons. So that classified it as a medium launch vehicle. And that's why we have to wait 2 weeks before we can launch a medium launch vehicle. But in any case, we launched the first one that was a partial success, the Elliott Burton, on day 97, which was a Monday, the first day of the third month of the year. So we left, what's the name? Mau. Mau is the second month, and Nama? Wait, let me check. Namu is the third month. So we entered the third month of the year. And then we waited just another week, 2 weeks after that, actually, to launch the medium lift vehicle. Even though it still uses the Pulsar rocket, just with the bigger fins. And then, of course, the Meteor B with a bigger fuel tank. It did struggle to get off the launch pad, but it did work at least. So I didn't unlock any science in that episode. We still don't have enough to get solar panels, which is what I'm working towards. But anyway, rather than just giving you the actual audio of the episode, which would be kind of strange, I just thought, let me do a review while it's fresh for me as well, so that we can just make sure nobody misses anything. You can see lots of people want us to do temperature surveys and all kinds of things like that, but I don't think we will, because our aircraft technology is quite poor at the moment. So anyway, there we have our two payloads, of course, launched from the desert, going retrograde by accident, but we won't say that publicly, you know. Of course, in the early days of rocketry, things were still a bit of a struggle, and we are still figuring things out, but they ended up going retrograde, and as I said, just barely made it. So there's the upper stage that put us into orbit. That is the Nova 5 Mr. Womble. And of course, now I'm using the International Designator. I've always been doing that for orbital missions, but of course they didn't stay in orbit. This is the first time they do stay in orbit. So that is 00. Actually, we should start with this one, because the Iris 2 was the ultimate payload for the mission. It was the reason for the mission in the first place. So that gets 0001, so the first year. 003, this is our third orbital launch, or third launch that made it into orbit, and A for the payload. Then the capsule with Jebediah in, because last time we used Valentina for an orbital launch, and she's still recovering from her crash there in the farmlands anyway. We called that then 0001, 003, because it's the same third launch, B, and then the upper stage debris is then C. So anyway, I'll take you to the satellite just so you can see it. It's a real shame. It's a traitor, this Bandicam. It never let me down except now this one time. Anyway, so there is our satellite. I think it looked very nice. It's just obviously the cargo containers here, but you know, with a rounded side to each side on the outside, just so it looks a bit nicer. And then just the 4 batteries and the Stay Putnik, so we don't actually have any control to move this thing. And it's out of range anyway, because we don't have any other antennas or anything, just the few at the launch site by default. So we'll still have to work on that, but not before we get solar panels. Then I'll want us to put extra antennas at the desert site and various other places as well. Let's just see if I can find the debris. I doubt it'll let me click to that. No, unfortunately not, because it doesn't have an active part. But it's... wait a minute. Don't want to target that. No, anyway, doesn't matter. It's literally just a you know, that FLT 400 tank with a Terrier engine. So it's the Meteor B. That's it. And of course it's the coupler on the top. I was doing with the idea of leaving that attached to the satellite, so it's only one piece of, not space debris yet, but because this is an active satellite, but just one object. But then I thought, no, for role-playing purposes anyway, for early missions, and because it wasn't planned to be one thing, we separated. So now we have two things in orbit. Anyway, comrades, I hope you'll forgive this. It was unavoidable. Anyway, we'll continue with episode 9 again. Hopefully that will work out. And anyway, I just wanted to say I'm glad to be back again and making videos. And I hope you're doing very well. And anyway, it's good just so I keep you in the loop with everything. So that's all that happened. Anyway, have a nice day, comrades.